Hi everybody, I'm Marc Laurenson, and we're continuing on with the South Node through the Sign series. And in this episode, episode number 8, we're going to be talking about the South Node in the sign of Scorpio. So when you're looking at a person who has the South Node in Scorpio, you're looking at somebody who has an emotion memory around being pushed to the edge, so to speak, being taken to the extreme of something that they had to try and handle. Now, I find that for most people, it's got something to do with their survival. But I don't want to actually make out that everybody with the South Node in Scorpio had their survival threatened. But I do want to underscore the fact that the South Node in Scorpio carries that kind of intensity. Now, if you go back into history, and even in recent history, there's no shortage of people who are actually fighting for their lives. And so in many, many cases, the South Node in Scorpio has that quality to it, that feeling of having to keep your head above water in very drastic or rather traumatic kind of situations. Now, you're going to be looking at the house that the South Node is in. You're going to be looking at two planets as the ruler. You're going to be looking at Pluto as the modern ruler, and you're also going to be looking at Mars as the traditional ruler. Now, I look at both. I look at the signs that they're in and the houses that they're in to give me more information. And I'm going to also be looking at all the planets that come into aspect with the South Node as well, because that will flesh it out. Now, the South Node in Scorpio is not a one-size-fits-all, like all the South Nodes. They're all going to be played out in very, very different ways. But I find the South Node in Scorpio can be played out along the spectrum, meaning that the South Node in Scorpio can be played out very personally, in a relationship of sorts, one-to-ones, that kind of thing. Or collectively, it can be played out in a war or in a group situation or an organization. But the underpinning, the under sort of current that's going on with the South Node in Scorpio is always about power, and usually lack of it, and control, and usually somebody fighting on that level for control. Now, when you're looking at on a personal level, it could be getting involved with somebody else where the power and control was taken from you. And of course, on a collective level, in a war, that would have happened on the level of having authorities or the governments, or just what was happening at the time in the world that had power over you at that particular time. So there's always going to be a fight of sorts on your hands, and it's very similar to the South Node in Aries in that respect. But I find that the South Node in Scorpio carries more of an emotional undercurrent, more of an emotional intensity that gets involved with this. Now, when you're looking at the South Node in Scorpio, you're going to be looking at people who were Scorpionic. These could have been the witches and the warlocks of yesteryear, people who were burnt at the stake because they were looked on as being bad or evil, people who worked with death, people who worked amongst the dying, or people who were in the shadows, so to speak, or worked in secrecy, like spies or undercover agents. These are all people who carry a South Node in Scorpio kind of energy. Now, when you're looking at the South Node in Scorpio, you've always got to look at it in contrast to the North Node in Taurus. Now, the North Node in Taurus, of course, brings in the serenity and the simplicity that's needed in this lifetime. So you get the complex nature, and you get, as I said, the trauma and the angst that's brought in from the South Node in Scorpio that needs to be calmed down. Now, the South Node, the North Node in Taurus carries the energy of becoming earthed. It's about becoming safe. It's about being able to have your feet on the ground, so to speak, to feel the earth between your toes. Now, the North Node in Taurus is highly sensual. It's a beautiful, when it's played well, it has this beautiful, rich, safe, secure, sensual feeling. So getting into anything to do with nature, into music, into anything to do with making stuff with your hands, sculpting, painting, dancing, the feeling of you being able to languish in the earth and what the earth has to offer, and feel safe and secure and serene and calm is what it's all about. This is the remedy, so to speak, for the South Node in Scorpio. Now, the South Node in Scorpio, as I said, is not necessarily always going to be about somebody fighting for their lives or about death. It could be about something that ended, something that was cut off. So, a divorce carries that energy, of people who had something one day and lost it the next. That's a very South Node in Scorpio kind of event. Now, sex, you cannot go past sex with the South Node in Scorpio, meaning sex could have been a big part of the South Node in Scorpio scenario. Dealings with the power or the powerlessness of what went down on that level. Also money, sex and money. Money comes in big time with the South Node in Scorpio. People who would have lost a lot of money in the Depression, or probably had a lot of money one day and, as I said, were bottomed out. The next is a very South Node in Scorpio kind of event. The need to come into the Taurus understanding of safety, security, and even with Taurus in the body, that feeling of being able to understand the body and love the body and languish in the body and languish in the senses is a good healing remedy for anybody who went through any trauma to do with sex and any of the shame and the guilt that is brought in with that. So by adding a little bit more of the Taurus energy this particular lifetime, adding this feeling of safety, this feeling of coming into a place of becoming more earthed and becoming and celebrating the body, celebrating the senses, being able to eat life, so to speak. This is a really good way for the Scorpio energy now to start to heal itself, because the Scorpio energy does want to eat life. The Scorpio energy really wants to get out in life. It really wants to feel the orgasm of life. It wants to get out into life, and it really wants to take it to the nth degree. But it can't take it to the nth degree in a fearful, mistrusting way. It has to come into a soft and loving place for that to happen.